Picture this. You're sitting on one of those examination tables,
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
right, with that crinkly paper that makes a ridiculously loud tearing noise every single time you even slightly shift your weight.
It is the worst sound, so stressful.
Exactly. And the fluorescent lights are buzzing somewhere above you. You do not feel well at all. I mean, maybe your head is pounding or your throat feels like you swallowed broken glass.
Yeah, you're already stressed out, you feel vulnerable, and honestly, you just want to feel better.
Right. Now, I want you to imagine having to navigate that entire really high-stakes interaction, having to explain the absolute most nuanced details of your physical pain, and having to comprehend complex medical instructions.
And doing all of that in a second language?
Yes, it's an incredibly massive layer of complexity slapped right on top of a situation that's already, guaranteed to induce anxiety.
It really is. It's like trying to run a heavy virus scan on your computer while trying to play a high graphics video game at the exact same time.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
Your brain's CPU is completely maxed out. Because when we're sick, our cognitive resources are heavily depleted. Our biology is literally utilizing all of our available energy just to manage the physical illness itself, fighting off whatever infection we have.
Right, fighting the actual bug.
Exactly. So forcing that same exhausted brain to simultaneously translate medical terminology and parse completely different cultural nuances in communication and formulate highly precise sentences, it's a monumentally demanding neurological task.
It really is. And that's exactly what we're tackling in today's deep dive. We're unpacking an incredibly practical set of concepts from a clinical communication blueprint. It's called Clinical Confidence, Mastering Medical English Conversations.
It's a fantastic resource.
It really is. And our mission for you today is straightforward, but it's going to be incredibly powerful. We're extracting a very precise, structured communication framework from this blueprint so you can confidently navigate a doctor's visit in English.
Which is huge.
Right. We're going to look at a highly specific set of conversational tools designed to get you from that waiting room to the diagnosis to the pharmacy with absolute crystal clarity. Okay, let's unpack this.
I'm ready.
Trying to explain how you feel to a doctor in another language without a solid, pre-planned strategy is essentially like trying to describe a complicated transmission problem to a mechanic while your car's security alarm is blaring right in your ear.
Yes.
You just can't think straight. You desperately need a reliable, simple formula to cut through all of that noise.
I love that car alarm imagery because that blaring siren is the perfect representation of the anxiety and the very real physical discomfort that clouds our ability to communicate.
It just drowns everything out.
Yeah, exactly. And the clinical framework we're exploring today acts as the literal key fob that turns that blaring alarm off. It gives you back your focus.
Which you need.
You absolutely need it because the reality is, before anyone can be diagnosed with anything, and before any treatment plan can possibly be written, a very specific type of psychological and professional relationship must be established in that small room.
Right, the dynamic has to be set.
Exactly. And the core physical issue has to be defined with zero ambiguity.
Okay, so let's move straight from the overarching concept of clinical confidence into the very first moments of the encounter. The moments that clinic door swings open and the doctor walks in.
The crucial first impression.
Right. And the blueprint we're looking at keeps this initial interaction incredibly, almost shockingly, straightforward. The recommendation for the patient is to simply say, "Hello, doctor," or "Good morning, doctor."
Yep, that's it.
Now, looking at this as someone who appreciates conversation, it almost feels too simple, doesn't it? I mean, it feels like we're entirely skipping the human element.
It absolutely feels simple, yes, but that simplicity is a highly intentional strategic choice. You have to remember that in a clinical setting, time is the single most critical resource in the room.
Right, they're usually rushing from room to room.
Exactly. By sticking to a standardized, universally understood greeting, you're immediately establishing a baseline of respect and you're acknowledging the professional dynamic.
Okay, I see that.
And more importantly, you're doing this without wasting a single drop of cognitive energy on trying to figure out how casual or how formal you're supposed to be.
Ah, right. You don't have to wonder, should I ask how their weekend was? Should I comment on the weather?
Exactly. You're setting a neutral baseline instantly. No guessing required.
Which perfectly clears the runway for the most important part, explaining the actual problem.
Yeah.
This is where the framework gets really granular.
It really does.
It gives us two very distinct structural pathways for presenting symptoms. The first is the I have a structure, For example, I have a headache or I have a sore throat.
Right.
The second pathway is the I've been feeling structure. For instance, I've been feeling sick for 2 days. Now, looking closely at this, I notice a major deliberate grammar shift between the two. Saying I have a headache feels like a photograph,
Oh, I like that.
like a snapshot of exactly how my body feels right this very second. But saying I've been feeling sick for 2 days feels completely different. It's like a video playing on a loop. It has a definite timeline.
That's a great distinction.
So does this shift in grammar actually change how the doctor's brain perceives the urgency or the underlying nature of the problem?
Absolutely. It profoundly changes it. And that's a crucial distinction for anyone trying to master this specific framework. The I have a statement gives the physician the what. It identifies the localized acute symptom.
The snapshot.
Right, the snapshot. But the I've been feeling statement, which, utilizes the present perfect continuous tense, gives the doctor the how long. It establishes a medical trajectory.
And the video loop.
Exactly. Because a headache that you have right now is one specific diagnostic issue. But a sickness you've been feeling for 2 consecutive days implies a sustained, ongoing failure of your body's immune system to fight off whatever is happening.
Oh, wow.
It tells the doctor that they need to look for an ongoing systemic process, not just an isolated, momentary incident.
That makes a lot of sense.
Both are absolutely vital pieces of data, but they trigger completely different diagnostic flowcharts in the physician's mind.
So as the patient, you're actively guiding the medical investigation right out of the gate based purely on which grammatical structure you choose to deploy.
Yes, exactly.
That's fascinating. But looking at these examples in the methodology, I have a headache, I have a sore throat, I've been feeling sick for 2 days. They're so incredibly direct, almost aggressive in their brevity.
What's fascinating here is the extreme, almost brutal brevity of the prescribed dialogue.
It really is bare bones.
If you look closely at the blueprint, there is absolutely zero conversational filler allowed. There's no, well, it started when I was at the grocery store. Maybe it's because the weather changed so fast. None of that.
Right, no storytelling.
The communication model presented here actively prioritizes direct, clear statements over polite small talk. And we have to acknowledge that in many everyday social situations, speaking this directly might actually be considered blunt or even rude.
Oh, for sure. If you talk like that at a dinner party, people would think you were so rude.
But in a medical setting, linguistic ambiguity is genuinely dangerous. Directness becomes a medical virtue.
A medical virtue, I like that phrase.
Because it ensures that the translation from your subjective internal medical experience to the doctor's objective clinical understanding is as pure and unfiltered as possible.
That makes total sense. You're stripping away the social fluff, all those culturally ingrained politeness markers to deliver pure, actionable data. And once you deliver that data, once you've clearly established the what and the how long, the conversation naturally has to shift. This is where we enter what we might call the diagnostic dance.
The diagnostic dance, that's good.
The power dynamic in the examination room totally flips here. You, the patient, have just presented the puzzle. Now, the doctor officially takes the lead to investigate it, cross-reference it, and eventually issue directives.
Exactly. The patient sets the stage and provides the initial coordinates, but the doctor directs the play from that exact point forward.
Right. Once you've handed over that initial timeline, the doctor has to start digging for pure data to narrow down the suspects. The framework highlights the specific kinds of data-gathering questions the doctor will deploy, like, how long have you had these symptoms? Or, do you have a fever?
They're essentially running a verbal algorithm.
Yeah, a verbal algorithm. And then once they've gathered enough data from you, we move into the treatment phase, receiving the actual medical advice or instructions.
Right, the outcome of the algorithm.
And the examples the blueprint provides for this phase are things like get plenty of rest, drink more water, and take this medicine twice a day. Now, I want to pause here for a second because this really caught my eye.
Okay, what is it?
The doctor's advice relies entirely on direct imperative verbs. Get, drink, take.
Yes.
In our everyday conversational English, speaking to someone in a string of unbroken imperatives can sound incredibly demanding, bossy, or even highly dismissive.
It definitely can.
So, in a clinical setting, is this bluntness actually the most compassionate way for a doctor to speak?
That's a really profound way to look at it. Yes,
Yeah.
It is deeply compassionate, and let's explore why. Think back to our earlier point about the patient's depleted cognitive resources that maxed out CPU.
Right, when you can barely think straight.
Exactly. When you're sitting on that crinkly paper, feeling terrible, maybe running a fever, Your prefrontal cortex is simply not equipped to process linguistic nuance, subtlety, or overly polite suggestion.
It is so true.
If the doctor says something like, it might be a really good idea if you perhaps tried to gently increase your fluid intake over the next few days, your tired, sick brain has to actively decode that sentence.
Oh, man, yeah. Is it merely a friendly suggestion? Is it a strict medical requirement? And what exactly does fluid intake mean in this context? Can I drink soda?
Right, you're forcing the patient to do high-level linguistic gymnastics when they can barely keep their eyes open.
Yeah, that's not helpful.
Precisely. By utilizing strong, unambiguous imperatives, drink more water, take this medicine, the doctor entirely removes the cognitive load from the patient's shoulders.
Oh, clear.
It requires absolutely zero interpretation. The doctor is demanding unambiguous action because the treatment plan requires unambiguous execution to work.
Right.
Compassion, in this highly specific context, looks like absolute crystal clarity. It ensures there is zero chance for misinterpreting the path forward to getting healthy.
It reminds me of the difference between a tour guide suggesting you might want to look at a beautiful painting on your left and a firefighter telling you exactly which door to exit through during an emergency.
That is a brilliant
I
comparison.
mean, one is a polite suggestion meant to enhance an experience. The other is a vital instruction meant to save you.
Exactly. And notice the underlying structure of the doctor's questions that lead up to those firefighter-style imperatives.
Okay. Yeah.
A question like, how long have you had these symptoms, actively demands quantitative data. It requires a number, a specific time frame.
It's not asking for a generalized feeling.
Right. It's not asking for a story. The entire medical exchange is engineered to move sequentially from the patient's subjective experience to objective measurable data, and finally to highly actionable directives.
Okay, so we've analyzed the individual pieces of this conversation scattered on the table. We've got the neutral greetings, the targeted problem statements, the data gathering questions, and the imperative advice.
The whole toolkit.
Right. Now, we really need to see how these puzzle pieces interlock organically in a real-world scenario to actually resolve a patient's issue.
Because it all has to come together.
Exactly. The communication blueprint provides a full, natural conversation example that pulls all this theory together into practice.
Right. This is where the theory actually meets the practice. It's one thing to memorize the vocabulary on flashcards. It's an entirely different thing to execute the dance smoothly when you're under pressure in the room.
Absolutely. So let's walk through the anatomy of it. In the example provided, the patient starts by saying they've been feeling sick since yesterday.
Video loop?
Right. The doctor then asks for the specific symptoms. The patient lists a headache, a sore throat, and a slight fever.
Okay.
The doctor asks how long the symptoms have been present. The patient clarifies since yesterday afternoon, and the doctor synthesizes the protocol. Rest, water, and medicine.
Very clean.
Super clean. And finally, we hit the end of the visit with standard wrap-up phrases like, "Thank you, doctor," and "I appreciate your help," followed by the doctor's socially expected, "I hope you feel better soon."
Right, closing the loop.
But I want to reverse back to the middle of that exchange.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The patient explicitly says they have a slight fever. They add a descriptive qualifier. And I have to push back on this a little bit because we just talked about stripping away the fluff. Is it genuinely risky for a patient to qualify their symptoms with words like slight or a little bit or kind of?
That is a great question.
Like, does it risk dangerously downplaying the severity of the illness, or does it actually provide a more accurate, helpful clinical picture for the doctor's triage process?
That is a very delicate balance to strike, and it's a huge source of anxiety for non-native speakers.
I can imagine.
From a purely clinical perspective, adding a qualifier like slight can be incredibly helpful provided it is highly accurate. A fever of 99 degrees is clinically a very different beast from a fever of 103 degrees. The word slight gives the doctor an immediate rough categorization of the severity before they even pull out a thermometer to take your temperature.
So it's a shortcut.
Exactly. It actively helps them perform mental triage. However, the risk you mentioned is incredibly real.
Right, because what if you're wrong?
Well, or if a patient is trying to be culturally stoic, or if they're deeply self-conscious about their English proficiency and trying to unconsciously minimize their burden on the doctor, they might say slight when they actually mean severe.
Oh, wow. Which circles right back to the very real danger of ambiguity we talked about earlier. If you downplay it, the algorithm outputs the wrong treatment.
Exactly. The algorithm is only as good as the data entered into it.
Right.
But assuming the patient is being completely accurate with their self-reporting, the word slight adds necessary texture to the clinical picture. If we connect this to the bigger picture of the entire dialogue example, we see how beautifully structured this information exchange actually is. Look at the volley of information. The doctor asks a specific data-driven question. How long have you had these symptoms? The patient answers with surgical precision. Since yesterday afternoon.
It perfectly satisfies the exact parameter of the question. Nothing more, nothing less.
It's a flawless lock and key mechanism. The doctor presents a receptacle for information, the question about duration, and the patient places the exact right puzzle piece perfectly into it.
So satisfying.
No extra stories about what they ate for lunch, no meandering details about their commute, just the pure data required to unlock the next required step, which is the treatment plan.
That is so efficient.
This is what clinical confidence genuinely looks like in action. It's absolutely not about possessing a massive native-level vocabulary. It's about knowing exactly which piece of information belongs in which receptacle.
And that idea of structure over vocabulary perfectly sets up the final section of our deep dive today. Understanding the anatomy of this conversation is the theory. I mean, it's great to listen to us talk about it intellectually, but the framework doesn't just leave us hanging with theory.
No, it gives us practical steps.
Exactly. It gives us a strict methodology for actual execution and practice. It forces us to move from passive understanding to active application.
Which is truly the only way a second language learner can actually build that vital muscle memory. You have to practice the mechanics until they become second nature.
The blueprint outlines a very specific practice task. It's basically a challenge.
Yeah.
Describe a health problem using exactly 3 English sentences.
Exactly 3.
No more, no less. It's a highly constrained exercise. Sentence 1 has to be your symptoms. Sentence 2 has to be the duration or exactly how long you've had them. And sentence 3 has to be the action plan, what the doctor told you to do to feel better.
Okay.
So what does this all mean? To me, this strict 3-sentence challenge is essentially an elevator pitch for your health.
Oh, I love that.
Right. When you step into an elevator with a major investor, you had exactly 30 seconds to sell your entire business idea. You have to ruthlessly edit out all the fluff and focus exclusively on the core value proposition.
Yes.
When you step into a doctor's office, especially when you're deeply anxious, feeling terrible, and speaking the second language, you have to actively edit out the panic. You have to deliver the pristine elevator pitch of your illness.
The elevator pitch is a brilliant way to frame it. This raises an important question, though. Why 3? Why exactly 3 sentences? Why not 2 or 5?
Right. Why the magic number?
The rule of 3 is a foundational concept in human communication, rhetoric, and neurology. Our brains are uniquely wired to process, categorize, and remember information presented in triads.
Oh, interesting.
In this specific high-stress context, limiting the practice to exactly 3 sentences prevents massive information overload for both the speaker and the listener. It actively lowers cortisol levels.
It creates a psychological boundary, a safe zone.
Exactly. When you're nervous and your fight or flight response is kicking in, the tendency is often to babble, to over-explain in the desperate hope that if you just throw enough words at the doctor, they'll eventually figure it out.
I do that even in my native language.
Right. Or, conversely, the stress makes you freeze up entirely and you can't speak at all. The 3-sentence rule gives your panicked brain a container.
A container, yes.
It tells your nervous system you only need to construct 3 discrete thoughts. First, the what. Second, the how long. Third, the what next.
That is so manageable.
By forcing this neurological constraint during your practice at home, it serves as the ultimate confidence-building tool. When you walk into the real clinic under all those buzzing fluorescent lights, you don't have to desperately search the infinite, overwhelming database of the English language. You just have to pull up your preloaded 3-sentence template.
It's like giving yourself a script. You know your exact lines before you even walk onto the stage.
Exactly.
You practice. I have a headache and a sore throat. That's sentence 1, the snapshot. I have felt this way for 2 days. Sentence 2, the timeline. I need to rest and drink water. Sentence 3, the imperative action plan. It is entirely 100% manageable.
And completely manageable is exactly what you desperately need when your CPU is maxed out by illness. It transforms a chaotic, highly intimidating experience into a predictable, mechanical process.
The algorithm again.
Right. You input the data, the doctor processes it through their algorithm, and you receive the actionable output.
Which brings us to the core takeaways we really want to distill for you today. If you're listening to this and preparing for a medical appointment in English, the single most important thing to remember is that confident medical communication isn't about knowing complex medical jargon.
Not at all.
You don't need to memorize the Latin names for your bones or understand the chemical compounds in your prescription medicine. It's entirely about mastering a predictable, step-by-step structure.
It's a beautifully logical sequence. You greet neutrally to establish the baseline and save cognitive energy. You explain the localized problem and the duration, giving the doctor their diagnostic trajectory. You answer their specific questions to provide pure, unfiltered data. You receive their imperative advice without taking the bluntness personally, recognizing it as absolute clarity. And you end the interaction with simple, standard gratitude. Greet, explain, answer, receive, end.
It's a formula. And formulas work precisely because they're endlessly repeatable.
They do.
We strongly encourage you to take that 3-sentence elevator pitch challenge and actually practice it. Don't just think about it in your head. Actually say the words out loud in your living room.
Out loud is key.
Yes, practice these specific practical phrases daily. That physical repetition is what takes the nervous, blaring car alarm energy in your head and transforms it into quiet, focused, clinical confidence. When the high-stakes moment actually comes, the words will be there waiting for you because you've already paved the neurological pathways.
You're ultimately building a psychological toolkit that allows you to strongly advocate for your own health and well-being, which is quite frankly one of the most empowering things you can do in any language.
It truly, truly is. Which leaves me with one final thought I want to throw out to you, the listener, to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive.
What is it?
Well, we've spent this entire time talking about how the medical setting absolutely forces us to strip our language down to its most necessary, functional, bare-bones parts.
Right.
We proactively remove the polite filler, we embrace blunt, bossy imperatives, and we focus purely on actionable data. It is incredibly ruthlessly efficient. But it makes me wonder, when we're forced to practice communicating this way, stripping away all the cultural noise and focusing only on the absolute, unvarnished truth of a situation, do we actually become better, more precise communicators in our everyday lives outside the clinic?
That's a great question.
Right. If you can successfully learn to turn off the blaring car alarm in your head in a high-stress doctor's office, maybe you can use that exact same key fob everywhere else.